Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Muhi Khwaja with American Muslim Community Foundation. Thank you for joining the Muslim Philanthropy podcast. Today we have on Ihssane Leckey. Thank you so much for being here.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for having me.
Wa alaikum assalam. So Ihssane is a certified negotiator from Harvard Law School, a former Federal Reserve regulator, and a former candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in Massachusetts' 4th District. As a Muslim immigrant who has risen through the halls of power, she has dedicated her career to advancing justice, economic dignity, and leadership rooted in integrity and empathy. Her work focuses on protecting survivors of domestic violence, elevating Muslim civic leadership, and building bridges across communities, creating spaces for courage, healing, and collective purpose. Ihssane believes that lasting change begins with moral clarity and with everyday people rising to lead. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Brother Muhi. This is a great opportunity to get to know each other more, and to really, give an image of what it's like to walk our purpose in life as a Muslim community.
Definitely. Please share a little bit more about your personal background, family life, professional life, whatever you'd like to share before we get into more of the context so our listeners can learn more about you as well.
Oh, sure. I would say since I was a little girl, about 6 or 7, I was finding my purpose in talking with my friends about how to help people who are left alone, who are not, who are in need. Um, and I was definitely an outlier. I would say that. Some of my friends started calling me an imam, or saying, you're always like referring to this religious text, and we just want to have fun and play. But I just always found comfort in speaking out the truth. Like, yeah, we all want to have fun, but let's not forget about so and so. And just because somebody is quiet, that doesn't mean that they don't have anything to say. Um, that really drove my education and my career into public service. I came to the United States of America, at an age of 20, and it's been 20 years. So if you want to guess my age. Um, but I'm proud to have received the education I received in Morocco, in Arabic, in the Quran, in our principles as Muslim people and our values, and in accounting and economics and everything I've learned, and also bring it to America, the country that um, gave me a dream to believe in, where the work that I do and the alignment with my purpose is needed. There are so many people are going through hard times, and that it is in the hard times that we are called to serve. Um, that for me started from flipping kabobs in the Upper East Side of Manhattan as a new immigrant, who did not have documentation to work, but I still persevered through um, being, paid below the minimum wage, facing wage theft uh, from past restaurant owners, and not having a safety net to even complain about it, but pick myself up and look for the next job and the next job to make sure I can have a somewhat decent place to live in while I am seeking the education that my mother and her mother and her mother wasn't able to achieve, was not allowed to achieve. As women in my family were very, very, very smart, but were needed more in the home and were not allowed to go to school, unfortunately. Yet it was still my mother's dream that I go to college and get a college degree. I remember when I had a final day for delivering some documents to Boston University during the application time, and my mother and I running down Bay State Road before it's 5 p.m. so we can hand deliver these documents that she brought with her from Morocco. Um, and we made it on time, and she gave me the biggest hug, and she was like, "You are gonna get accepted here." And not only that I was accepted, but I was also given a scholarship for women in math at Boston University, and that it really like shattered all the ceilings in my family. It's like we were told that girls can't do math. I had believed into that rhetoric at a young age and got a passing grade. But to come here and live that dream, the American dream, which is um, the freedom to believe in oneself and one's
Right.
abilities and not be judged and just buy into how we are judged as a people or as a community. Um, it really like it changed my life, like the way educators believed in me, the way my neighbors, my clients believed in what I can do was new to me. And one would say this is the new world still for somebody who grew up in a small city in North Africa. But so I mean I can continue on if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Please.
I did continue, thank you. I did continue in following my purpose. I was absolutely shocked to find out that in the richest country in the history of the world, we have hunger, we have homelessness, we don't have access to medical needs. Um, I experienced those things firsthand in various forms. Um, and it was my call to do something about it. So as soon as I graduated college, I worked at the largest food bank in the tri-state area called Phil Abundance, and it's in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
And I was advocating for the city of Harrisburg to not cut food stamps right after the financial crisis 2008. So we're talking about, states needing financing. We're talking about cities going underwater. We're talking about bankruptcies, right and left in our government institutions. And the first thing a state treasurer was thinking to do is to cut food stamps. And this is something that, we can relate to very well right now because we are, again, 42 million people were not receiving their food stamps just this past couple of weeks. And we felt the responsibility. And as a Muslim person, I think, okay, we pay taxes, we pay into this fund that's going to feed the hungry. This is one of our big principles as Muslim people, to feed the hungry, to take care of the orphan. We're ordered to do these things. And so how could we be paying taxes? This is going into a fund, and we have a president who decided, no, we're not gonna use those funds, and we're gonna let those people go hungry. But alhamdulillah, our community keeps showing up, right? We keep showing up even when we feel injustice, we keep showing up for people who are in need. But the question or the answer doesn't stop at, okay, let's make sure that people have food when they're hungry. The question is, why are they hungry in the first place? We're a very
Yeah.
wealthy country. So what can we do about that? So I rolled up my sleeves and dug deeper. I studied public finance at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, and I was able to land a job in public finance and refinance billions of dollars worth of debt. And what that means is that the debt that our communities borrow to build bridges, to build school systems, um, to fix infrastructure in general or have better transit, that debt was at a very high interest rate. And so, alhamdulillah, with the work that I was able to do, I lowered those interest rate payments, which is again, it's aligned with, those of us who believe that riba is haram, right? And so lowering the burden of the interest rates on every family and every small business meant that our local governments can have now a little bit more money to invest in small business and to invest in local families. Alhamdulillah, that was very fulfilling to me until I again raised the question, but why do we have cities that were going bankrupt? This is the richest country in the history of the world. Why do we have cities going bankrupt? Why do we have a Wall Street that is not being held accountable? Why do we have these big, giant banking and financial institutions that were taking up risks beyond what they can pay for and going to our government and ask and demand that the people bail them out? That's injustice. So I stepped up again. I worked at the Federal Reserve to regulate the too big to fail, the systemically important financial institutions. And actually, I do teach a class right now to high schoolers at Alhambra Academy in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, about economics and financial justice. And we are going through these very concepts of how much is too much freedom and how much is too much regulation, right? And understanding that we have institutions that we've created to stabilize our systems, and those institutions are under a huge threat as you and I speak. When I worked at the Federal Reserve, I saw the power of our democracy. I saw how our government made decisions so that these big institutions, big financial institutions, would have to hold aside capital to bail themselves out if they took a risk and failed for whatever risk from their taking or as a domino effect of something else that happened. One of the things that used to be as part of this regulatory Dodd-Frank framework was that a scenario, for example, of how global warming, how climate change could affect assets of a large bank.
Hmm.
Small example, Florida could just drown one day. And so in Florida, there are a lot of buildings, there's a lot of commercial real estate. And so if a bank holds a lot of this commercial real estate on their books, and all of this is literally going under the ocean, that can create um, a risk on that bank, right? And so we built a system where if that bank is suffering, it will have put aside enough capital to make up for that loss and not come to the federal government and say, hey, give me from the people's money to bail me out, because if I fail, so and so bank is going to fail and so institution is going to fail, and therefore our whole financial system will be suffering. Um, those protections are now under threat. Some of them are gone. The whole point of stress testing based on global on climate change is no longer a requirement under the Trump administration. And so, you know, the call to service, it never goes away. It actually becomes more and more imperative when things are harder. Um, there are many areas where I practice this, answering the call to service in hard times. And one of them is for our brothers and sisters who live in Gaza, Israel, and the West Bank. And I see the way these people walk the actionable hope. It really lifts me up every day through my advising and executive coaching for their startups to see that someone is literally, their aunt just got shot at under an olive tree, and the next day they're getting up to still build that business, to still build that economy and that future for their little children. That gives my heart that extra beat to get up every day and say, you know what? I'm going to show up for these people. That's the work I love to do day in and day out and build in the midst of destruction.
You've shared a lot of context around, some of the societal problems and issues around, you know, resources, alignment, trying to make systems and infrastructure more um, fair for everybody, right? So looking at what access to proper healthcare or food or education, certain basic rights that should be there, fundamental things for everyday people, whether here or in Palestine. What would you say are some of those questions that you're asking yourself today to focus on in today's climate? So you talked about, SNAP benefits being cut, government shutdown, just came back open again. It's going to take some time to fulfill a gap or a need in the community. And oftentimes we see philanthropy step in where government falls short, right? So what do you think the, you know, blend of infrastructure between philanthropy and government can do to kind of better support the needs of everyday Americans?
I think that, government is there to serve the people. And unfortunately, right now, we do not have a government that has the al-basira. It's not that our government can't see that people are suffering and that we have the funds to end this suffering and live a better life. It's that um, they are unconscionable and they don't want to see it with their minds and with their hearts and with their deeds. And that makes that makes a huge difference, right, between what a nonprofit is doing versus what the government is doing. When we have a government that is dysfunctional, or that is, it's not dysfunctional. Our government is perfectly functional in inflicting pain on the people. That's what
Mm,
we have right now. The nonprofits try to make up for the gap, right? People are going hungry, so nonprofits are going to step in. The food bank systems, zakat systems, all of these systems. But it's not enough. We also have nonprofits who are stepping in changing the look and feel of our governments, in changing the direction of how we govern our country and the impact of what we do on the rest of the world. And those nonprofits are doing an amazing job, whether they are, have a C4 arm, for example, or whether they're just a C3, but they are showing up to educate people. I mean, for God's sake, it's like, for example, just the other day at the mosque, I met a couple women who are going to be taking their citizenship exam soon. And I was asking them, do you know the three branches of government? And they were like, we're gonna need your help with that. So we're going to do a halaqah at the mosque about the exam. And one of them was explaining to me how the questions, they've added more questions. They've added higher standards for people to pass the citizenship exam. It has become a lot more strenuous. And I said, you know what? it doesn't matter how harder they make it for you to become a voter, you are going to become one. You're smart, and I'm going to help you. That's what I'm here for. Because I remember when I had to take that oath, right? I remember those times where I, I felt that the ability to vote was a privilege. Was a
Hmm.
privilege. I couldn't wait to vote. But even before I voted, I was already organizing. I was already getting my community together and helping them understand where the polls are, where is, what does it mean to be a United States citizen and be able to contribute to how our government is and the policies um, that our governments will be making to change families' lives. You mentioned something very important. I think it's one of the issues of our time right now. There's a lot of talk about the Epstein files, right?
Sure.
And I have done a lot of work around with survivors of sexual abuse. And it's a lot of trauma-informed work on how to really step into a better life and not be prisoner or to what happened in the past, not be a prisoner to how we've survived that abuse and make that uh, the way we live, whether as a victim of abuse or whether that we've become too controlling in our lives because we cannot deal with the unknown. The unknown is so scary. So those are the precious times that I get to spend with my brothers and sisters who are survivors. So when we think about the Epstein files, I want us to recognize that it is a constant trigger. I want us to recognize that there are more people in this country and the world than we know who are waiting to see justice delivered. And that is not partisan,
Hmm.
right?
It affects all communities. Yeah.
It absolutely does. We know so many people who are very successful in their lives, have amazing hearts, and are survivors. And they may not say that out loud, but they are there and they are watching. And I really hope that justice will be delivered and will be served.
Inshallah, I mean, and
Um,
I think the difficulty here is like it's also with a added layer of corruption of power, right? In our communities, we may see it in religious power in certain scenarios within the mosque, outside of the mosque, but also at the same time, you know, I think the statistics say that a majority, significant majority of Muslims don't even attend the mosque, right? So beyond the walls that some of our communities may participate in larger mainstream as well, um, these issues come to play in the workplace, in other dynamics. And as people who want to stand up for truth and justice, as you were so boldly saying and showcasing in your upbringing, um, how is it that Muslims can try to demand more of the status quo to fix the societal wrongs that are there as well, right? And what can we do within our own communities, within our own power, to kind of pursue that and build upright communities where these types of injustices don't occur, sexual abuse, power abuse, you name it.
mhm.
And I think that's going to be a tall challenge, but I think one that many communities across the country are facing.
Yes. I think, some of these nonprofit organizations are vital to the safety and stability of survivors. And, we're talking about survivors of sexual abuse, for example.
Hmm.
There are two organizations that I have worked with, one of which I serve on the board of advisors. Um, One is Taking Back Ourselves. It's a small organization, but is super mighty in its reach. It is, founded by professionals in psychotherapy, and it seeks to provide an environment where people can heal and can really face work through the traumas that they have survived, but also face themselves as survivors now and what shackles them in and keeps them from moving forward. Um, it's a very, to be honest, the programs that I have attended with this organization, although it's not a faith organization, it deepened my faith because I was able to show up as I am with my belief system and be around others in the community who were also able to show up as they are with their faith system. Um, and that was very sorry, I feel emotional when I talk about this because it is. I hold them all dear, all of the survivors I've done work with. Another organization, which is out of New York, it's called Men's Healing. And it initially did focus on men survivors of sexual abuse, and it really, really helps a lot. And the stories that I have heard from many, many survivors, which I hold dear and will never share, as those are our, protected information that we share with each other. I hold them dear, and it deepens my understanding of what it's like um, to carry this burden alone. Nobody should have to carry that burden alone. These organizations, I invite people who are listening to donate to them. I stand behind their work. And then in the domestic violence side, right, and a lot of the time, and you'd find that these things mix up the domestic, the sexual abuse and domestic violence, they mix up for many people, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But when we look at funding across the nonprofit sector, domestic violence is way more funded than organizations who are fighting sexual abuse because the subject of sexual abuse is a no-no for media, for politicians, for, even nonprofits, they try to stay away from it because it makes people way too uncomfortable. I understand that. So, some of the domestic violence organizations are well recognized, stepped in and created a branch for sexual violence or sexual abuse. And so they were able to raise more funds and funnel them into that area. But what I'm calling people to do here is to be truthful, not run away from problems that are too uncomfortable because the calling for service happens when things are hardest, when things are the most uncomfortable. Just like we're showing up for justice for the people in Gaza, for example,
Hmm.
or others are showing up for justice for the hostages from Israel. Or others are showing up for people in the West Bank. Others are showing up to find ways to create peace in this very tumultuous time. That calling is very important and should be honored. But we also have to understand that we have to hold more than one truth in the seeking of peace and seeking of building bridges and building a community that comes from suffering is that we have to hold more than one truth. It's the example is like um, I was talking to to my mother about this the other day, and I ended up sending her a letter from the womb. Um, and in this letter, I said, it is true that I am, inside of this heavenly womb that you've prepared for me. And it is true that it has become very tight for me because I am growing. And it is true that I want to stay here with you forever. And it's also true that I need to get out. And when I get out, I will see your beautiful face. And so that's what I mean by holding more than one truth. It's to see the full picture, it's to allow ourselves to experience the discomfort and also the light that comes in that moment, to recognize that in this suffering, there is also growth and learning. There's also a hand that is asking for us to step in, and not with words or just with thoughts. It's actually with action. That's what I mean by actionable hope. It's once you see the picture of peace and what that looks like, then you have to move your feet. You have to get going and start, whether you're doing your istikhara at night, or your night prayer, or you're reaching out to, a trusted sheikh or imam, or you're talking to your husband or wife, you're still are making small steps. But then eventually you're going to have to show up to change the policies, to create more safety nets for survivors. A survivor of domestic violence may not even be allowed to vote for the person they want to vote for. This is something that was very, very prevalent. For example, when Kamala Harris was running, and there was a whole movement that created safe pathways for survivors of domestic violence to vote for the person they want to vote for. These are things that we don't see in everyday life, but they are happening in the background, um, as those nonprofits, continue to do the work to hold our governments accountable.
Yeah, thank you for shedding light on a few different organizations that are meaningful to you. As we begin to wrap up, would you say there's any advice? And you shared a lot about acting locally, acting personally first within your framework, being able to change the community from within. Um, if there's anything else that you'd like to share as a frame of advice and offering to some of our listeners.
Um, Absolutely, community growth starts from the local, and the local starts from the self. In order for us to be, bridges for peace and for actionable hope, we have to be strong because we're asking people, come on, walk over me. I'm going to be the bridge. I'm going to hold the balance. I'm going to hold the many truths that are going to be presented so that we can start to build relationships and strengthen our unity in a time where we're being faced by um, authoritarianism, or by hunger, or the many threats that we're facing every day. Um, so I do give advice to strengthen the self first, and then reach out locally, start building that community, start a C4 organization, fundraise for it, bring, come show up in the civic world. You see how many Muslims, alhamdulillah, have been elected this year.
Right.
It's a long list of names across the United States of America at every level of office. So, if somebody shows up, tell them go ahead and do it. What is there to lose? I ran for Congress in 2020 on a Justice for All agenda, very well informed by all the data that I've seen through my work at the Federal Reserve, and the risk assessments nationally, internationally, all of it. And alhamdulillah, that was good. It put us out there as a people who are dedicated to our purpose, as a people who care about the underserved, and as a people who want the prosperity and safety of everyone, not only our community. We know that the safety and prosperity of our community lays in the safety and prosperity of all communities. And alhamdulillah, we will be successful. So just keep showing up, look up the C4s in your area, donate to them. And inshallah, we will continue to walk in God's light.
Inshallah. I mean, it's an intertwined story, and thank you for sharing your perspective on how our community can better integrate and help the larger community as well through all of the struggles that we face. I appreciate you taking time to share with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of
Appreciate it.
course. Salam.
Wa alaikum salam.